Good morning, boys and girls. Today we are going to be working on RL 5.5, and we are going to be in our Reader's Workshop RL point 4 to RL point 6 journal. So go ahead and turn to page 38 in your journal. And we're going to be doing the skill that explains how chapters, scenes, or stanzas provide the overall structure of a particular story, drama, or poem. Well, today we're going to focus on poetry. And we have a wonderful selection called My Shadow by Robert Louis Stevenson. And today I'm going to read through for you. Then I'm going to break down the different characteristics and structure of this poem. All right, follow along. We're on page 38. My Shadow by Robert Louis Stevenson. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me, from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow, not at all like a proper children, which is always very slow. For he sometimes shoots up taller, like an Indian rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so small that he's there, none of him at all. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play, and can only make a fool of me in every sort of way. He stays so close beside me, he's a coward, you can see. I think shame to stick to Nursey, as that shadow sticks to me. One morning very early, before the sun was up, I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup. But my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleepyhead, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. I wonder what happened to him in the end. What do you think? So as we look at this poem, let's break it down a little bit. So we up here at the top, we have our title. Then we have the author. And then we go into different stanzas. And a stanza is a series of lines. So keep in mind that a stanza is a series of lines. And it's the way poetry can be organized. Okay, and it gives you different points. Each stanza is giving you a different point to consider. And they all build on one another to form a understanding, a feeling. Not necessarily a story, but a feeling that you come away from. So each stanza here, so we have one stanza, we have two stanzas, we have three stanzas, we have four stanzas. Each stanza, if you noticed, has 4 lines. 4 lines in each one. Yes, they may continue on the next line, but this is still considered one line, one sentence, one line. Also, poetry can rhyme, and then it doesn't have to rhyme. It can be free verse. And this particular poem, it has some rhyming going on. And I don't know if you noticed it as I was reading it, but let's go back and point out some of those rhyming words. And those rhyming words are wonderful because they help us build a rhyming scheme. If you've never heard of a rhyming scheme, let me refresh your memory. Remember, a rhyming scheme is a pattern of rhymes at the end of each line of a poem or a song. And we are going to talk about that a little later. So let's look at the end of each line and see if we could find the rhyming scheme. Me, see, head, bed. Did you notice something going on there? And if you can see that the word me and see rhyme, we call that A, because those two rhyme. The next two words, let's see if they rhyme. Me, see, head. And head is different, so we're going to call him B. Head, bed rhyme, so they're a pair and they go together, so they're called B's. So we have A, B, B rhyming scheme. Let's move down to the next stanza and see if it follows the same pattern. I have grow, slow, ball, and all. And all comes from way over here. It's the last word in that line. So grow and slow. Do y'all hear that rhyme there? So we're going to call those are A. Ball and all also rhyme, but they do not rhyme with slow, so their own separate pattern there. So they've got A, B, B pattern going again. Let's go to the next stanza and see if we see that same rhyming scheme going on. Play, weigh, see, me. So A, and then C and me are two different ones. So we have the A, B, B pattern going on. The next line, we have up, buttercup, head, and bed. You're right. I know you're following along with me. You also see that rhyming scheme. So if you have a question where it says, what is the rhyming scheme of the poem? You can go back, look at the last word in each of the lines and say, do they go together? Do they rhyme? Do the next ones also rhyme? Okay. Next thing I want to point out is, what is the reason for each stanza in the poem? Go back and let's reread. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. Well, in this first stanza, think about what he's describing. He's describing his shadow, and that his shadow goes where he goes, wherever he goes. And he says his shadow is like him. And we know that shadows are formed by, that's a good question. What are they formed by? I'd love to hear your responses. So if you want to email me your response, I might give you some Bowman bucks for that. Or Mrs. Lamont might give you some Lamont bucks. So going to the next stanza, the funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow, not at all like the proper children, which is always very slow. For sometimes he shoots up taller like an Indian rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so little that there's none of him at all. So the first stanza is talking about him going places with him, and he's going everywhere. The second stanza is talking about how he grows and how he's very slow. The third stanza, let's see about it. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play and can only make a fool of me in every sort of way. He stays so close beside me. He's a coward, you can see. I think shame to stick to nursies as the shadow sticks to me. And in this third paragraph, he's talking about his shadow is always with him. It's always there. And so wherever he goes, it's with him. This last one morning early, very early, before the sun was up, I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup. So he was up very early, but my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleepyhead, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. He got up really early one morning, but then his shadow wasn't there. Why do you think his shadow might not be there? Maybe because it's very early, before the sun came out? So what do we need to have a shadow? If you said light, you are correct. Awesome job. So the whole poem follows a reason for the whole poem. It follows a series of stanzas that are leading us and putting together to help us develop a poem and help us develop a thought or feeling. And in this way, the author wants to describe shadows and how they're always with us and they're always following us. And depending upon this light, we see more or less of them. We see them at different times, like in the morning before the sun comes up, we won't see them. So just want to highlight here some of the characteristics and structure of poetry. Another thing that you might find in poetry is similes and metaphors. So if you can find some of them, some poems have them, some poems do not. So remember, a simile compares two things using like or as or the word than. And remember, metaphors or figure of speech refer to one thing as or one thing but mentioning another. We call them like similarities between two ideas, but they're kind of hidden. So you might find that or those concepts within poetry also, along with other figurative language like, oh my goodness, we could find versification. There might be some versification in here. I have to dig a little deeper this week. All right, boys and girls, that's just a highlight of My Shadow by Robert Louis Stevenson. Remember to read poems 1, 2, or 3 times to get the feeling and the mood of the poem and to understand what the author's coming across. And if you can't remember what mood is, remember it's that feeling displayed by the author towards the subject. And you can tell that the author really likes shadows because he did a whole poem, but you can also tell that he thinks they're playful. This whole thing was playful, all about shadows and how they follow you and how they grow with you and how sometimes they're not there. So very playful mood that the author is trying to convey there. All right, boys and girls, we'll continue this week through more poetry. Please reread